If you're a Jamaican citizen, your final chance for justice isn't found in Kingston. It's found over 7,000 kilometers away, in London. This might seem like a relic from a forgotten era, but for Jamaica, it is the present reality. Jamaica celebrated its independence from the United Kingdom in 1962. It was a moment of national pride, a step towards self-determination. Yet, a fundamental pillar of its statehood remains in the hands of its former colonial ruler. The nation's final court of appeal is not Jamaica's Court of Appeal, the highest local court in the land. It is the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, located in the heart of London. This isn't a modern arrangement. It is a direct colonial inheritance, a system established in 1833 to oversee the British Empire's vast legal territories. To this day, it binds Jamaica to a past it fought to leave behind. Changing this requires more than just a simple parliamentary vote. The Privy Council's role is entrenched in Jamaica's constitution. Removing it necessitates a constitutional amendment, a high political bar that has proven difficult to clear for decades. The irony is that a solution was created with Jamaica's own help. The Caribbean Court of Justice, or CCJ, was established in 2005. Its purpose was specific: to be the final appellate court for the Caribbean community, replacing the Privy Council and creating a truly regional, independent judiciary. Jamaica was instrumental in this process. It helped fund the CCJ's creation, investing in a court designed for its own people. Jamaica does use the CCJ, but only for trade disputes and treaty matters. When it comes to criminal and civil appeals, the cases that affect ordinary Jamaican citizens most directly, Jamaica has never made the switch. It remains one of the few major Caribbean nations to still send its people to London for final justice. The consequences of this arrangement are not abstract. They are measured in dollars and in access to justice. For an average Jamaican citizen to bring a case before the Privy Council, the financial burden is staggering. The journey begins with securing a UK visa, an often complex and costly process in itself. Then come the plane tickets for the long flight to London. But the most significant expense is legal representation. Litigants are required to hire UK-based barristers whose fees are far beyond the reach of most Jamaicans. The total cost can easily reach $65,000. And while a formal waiver exists for filing fees, it does nothing to cover flights, visas, or UK lawyers. This financial barrier effectively transforms the highest court in the land into a private club. It means that, in practice, final justice is a service available only to the wealthy and large corporations. The system, by its very design, excludes the vast majority of the population it is meant to serve. For decades, Jamaican politicians have debated the switch to the Caribbean Court of Justice. The arguments are well rehearsed. Supporters of the CCJ point to sovereignty, accessibility, and the importance of a judiciary that understands the region's unique social and cultural context. Opponents often cite a perceived lack of trust in local institutions or argue for the Privy Council's impartiality and experience. But promises to hold referendums and pass the necessary legislation have repeatedly stalled. The issue becomes a political football, passed between administrations with little concrete action. This decades-long political inertia has left Jamaica in a state of judicial limbo. What we are witnessing is a form of colonialism, hiding in plain sight. It operates not through governors and flags, but through the quiet, persistent structures of law. A nation's sovereignty is defined by its ability to govern itself, to create and interpret its own laws, and to provide justice for its own citizens. When the final word on that justice is spoken in another country, by judges from another culture, under a foreign monarch, that sovereignty is incomplete. It is a system that perpetuates a colonial dynamic, long after the colonial flags were lowered. The path to full independence, it seems, is longer than the journey taken in 1962, 60 years after independence. Why should a nation's highest legal authority remain a colonial artifact, accessible only to the few who can afford it?